understand the economy, you have to understand human nature.
This podcast is powered by Acast.
Maybe I just wanna fly, wanna live but don't wanna die. Maybe I just wanna breathe, maybe I just don't believe. Maybe you're the same as me, we see things I'll never see. You and I don't live forever. Don't live forever.
All right, John, you're going through your Oasis phase. I can see you with your parka. I can see you with your John Lennon shades and your 1995 haircut, your slightly Paul Weller-ish look.
That's it.
Live Forever brings back amazing memories for our generation, it must be said.
That's one of their best songs, actually.
And we're going to be talking not all about Oasis, because we've just about forgiven them for actually putting their name on a Bows jersey, not a Rovers jersey.
Oh, I think that's brilliant.
I know, but it's wrong team. Wrong team. But we're going to talk about living forever. So Noel Gallagher obviously writes that when they're young fellas. Liam Gallagher must be about 22, 23 when he's singing that.
Yeah.
We now know
Whining
that the
that.
biggest... Whining that, but he's got an amazing voice.
Oh, yeah,
I love
yeah. It's the delivery. It's not so much
Yeah.
the voice, it's just the delivery.
It's the delivery and it's the old mank thing and all that sort of stuff. And, of course, these are the big gigs of the summer. Of a summer of big gigs. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
But the Oasis
Expensive
gigs are
gigs.
the big ones. Very expensive gigs. Well, that's when you're marketing to alphalas who want to live forever, money pays. And that's what we're going to be talking about. Alphalas who want to live forever. This is the economics of not just Oasis, but the economics of living forever. Because, John, this is a real thing now, particularly in Silicon Valley.
So, yeah. And it's these multi-billionaires, tech bros that just have, I don't know, is it the money that they have that sends them a bit kind of bonkers? Is it these kind of childhood dreams that the money allows them to think? Like, look at Musk wanting to build rockets to go to Mars. And he's really serious about it. Bezos, well, he just wants to spin around the world and have big weddings and take over cities and that kind of stuff. But you know what I mean? It's all these billionaire guys who are just looking for something to spend their money on. I could give them a few ideas if they wanted.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The John Davis Charity Benevolent Fund.
Yes.
But let's go back to, I like to think that Live Forever comes from the fact that the Gallagher family and Noel and Liam's mum is from Mayo.
Yeah.
And that Noel and Liam's mum is steeped in Irish mythology. And basically, it was all about Tiernan Oak, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So if
remember
you
that
think
story.
so Tiernan Oak. So let's go back, because the idea is that humans have been, since time immemorial, John, trying to dodge death, right? And Musk and all those guys, but forget Musk, there's a whole different subsection of, as you say, tech billionaires who are now of the view that death is optional.
Yes, yeah. The arrogance of that.
So, but let's think about it, right? So Oisin, so let's go back. Oisin and Tiernan Oak, one of the foundational myths of Irish legends. So Oisin is taken in by a gorgeous redhead called Niamh of the Golden Hair. Now, Niamh of the Golden Hair, for those of you who like Irish legends, is the beautiful daughter of a fella called Monán Mac Lir. And Monán Mac Lir is no other than the god of the sea in old Celtic mythology, right? But not only is she the daughter, John, of Monán Mac Lir, so he's doing well, our Oisin, he's moving upwards in this world. She has the extra quality of being the queen of her own place, which is Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth.
Yes.
So when Niamh comes up, starts flirting with Oisin, says, "Come with me, darling." Oisin says, has a look at his mates who are in the Fianna, okay, the Crave Rua, the actual band of knights who defended Ireland.
Yeah.
His dad, think about it, he's abandoning not only the Fianna, his dad is Finn McCool. Imagine your alpha was Finn McCool.
You don't get better than that.
The man who created the Giant's Causeway, according to legend, okay? And, of course, off he goes with Niamh of the Golden Hair to Tir na Nog. Tir na Nog, Oscueliga, means the land. Tir na Nog is youth. John, you remember the Tishel Ginnaduct?
Oh, yeah.
Genitive case in Irish?
Sure I do. Yeah.
So Og is youth. Nanog is the genitive case, John, of
Yeah.
youth.
They were the details that kind of passed me by.
Oh, God almighty. Do you remember Irish grammar?
I remember Irish college. I was down there looking for my own Neve.
Exactly. I've never seen a bunch of Neves run away so quickly. Anyway, so poor old Oisin goes over to the land of eternal youth. He's hanging out with Neve of the golden hair. They're having a great time. 300 years pass in real Irish life and time. He thinks it's only 3 years in the land of eternal youth. Everybody wants to be in the land of eternal youth. He looks great. He has an amazing horse. He has an amazing girlfriend stroke wife. He's hanging out. He decides to go back and see all his mates in Ireland after 3 years, or what he thinks is 3 years is actually 300 years. He's on his horse, where when he gets off the horse and touches Irish soil, he is transformed into a wizened old man of 300 years old. And of course, John, the moral of the story is you cannot cheat death.
Exactly.
We all age, we all die, we all get old. We gradually, there's a cycle. You get born, you become an adult, and then gradually you get weaker and you get old. So the moral of the story is there is no such thing as Tír na nÓg in the real world.
Well, as Elton John said beautifully, it's the circle of life. But there is another
I
interpretation.
didn't realize you were an Elton John. Dad, you are displaying all sorts of eclecticism here.
Well, that's
John
me.
is the rocket man. There he is.
I sure am. But there is another interpretation of the Oisin and Tír na nÓg story. You know that. But it's
No, I don't know that. Go on, tell us.
It comes. You're going to laugh at this, of course, but it comes from the ancient alien theory that Oisin didn't go to Tír na nÓg, and it wasn't Neve, or perhaps Neve was an alien that abducted him.
Oh,
And
I
he
love it,
flew
John.
off.
I love it.
He
Okay.
flew off at the speed of light. And you know, in physics, if you fly at or close to the speed of light, time contracts. Your experience of time is
Yeah.
totally different.
Yeah, okay, I get that.
So he spun off around the universe or whatever for 3 years, which in time-wise down on Earth was the 300 years. So that's why he came back and was all confused going, where's everybody? Where's the lads?
Where's me mates?
Yeah, where's
Where's the
Nafina playing
lads?
hurling? You know?
Exactly.
And that's what it was.
So, John, what you're saying is that basically old Irish mythology understood that we are but guests on this earth and there are aliens around. And it's basically a UFO story.
Absolutely. But that's what the Daidanan were.
They were also UFO. They
Yes,
were also
yes.
aliens.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
Fear Bullig.
Yeah.
The Fear Bullig, they were also aliens. Oh, I love it.
Like the Anunnaki in the Middle East.
I love when you smoke weed.
I haven't been smoking. It's actually the wine here in France.
Anyway, we're going to talk about eternal youth, very theories. We started with Oasis, and now lads belting out Live Forever in a field or in the middle of a stadium, even though everyone's looking a little bit wizened. And we're talking about Oisin and Tír na nÓg. But the real thing, John, is there is a real industry out there of, as you say, tech bros, etc. And it's a modern movement. And the modern day Oisin is a fellow called Brian Johnson, right?
Okay.
And Brian Johnson he's a tech bro. I'll tell you all about him in a second, right? But he's kind of quite fascinating in a bizarre way, right? His aim is to engineer immortality. In 2021, he launched a thing called Blueprint, which is an obsessive sort of anti-aging regime, which will make his body function decades younger. He's subjecting himself to the craziest lifestyle, a vegan diet, 100-odd pills and supplements a day, strict sleep. They believe that sleep is absolutely essential. Exercises, of course, constantly medical. He's tested all the time, right? And his goal, John,
Yeah.
is to reprogram his body's aging process and prove that we may well be the first generation, or those guys anyway, not you and I, given the state of us, the first generation not to die.
Well,
Now-
it seems like he's reprogramming himself into being the most boring person on earth.
Oh, I know. Could you imagine? Imagine going out for a pint with this fella.
I'll just have sparkling water, please.
Yeah. I just sparkling water and I'll talk about myself endlessly,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Right? I just talk about to me,
Yeah.
me. So there's a certain amount of obviously crazy self-absorption here. Not a certain amount, an absolute amount. But let's just talk to you about who this guy is, right? A tech entrepreneur. He's a longevity evangelist, right? Now, you and I might laugh at this, but this is a movement. So basically, he was a fintech guy. He bought a company called Venmo, which was a sort of an app, a little bit like Revolut.
Yeah.
He bought it for $26 million in 2007. He sold it in 2013 to the tech giant PayPal. Now, who
okay.
was one of the founders of PayPal? Your friend Elon Musk.
Yes.
Back to your friend Musk again. And they acquired his company for 800 million. So he bought it for 26 million, sold it for 800 million.
Nice.
So he's now enormously wealthy.
Yeah.
And then he decides, okay, I'm going to live forever. And he spends a reported $2 million per year of his own money in his routine. He tracks everything from his heart rate to the frequency of his nighttime erections. John, do you know that?
Jeez.
No, because there's a whole movement in, I know
In his
we
pants?
can't mention, there's a huge movement in his pants, but there's a whole movement of tech bros not to ejaculate.
What?
It's called optimal longevity, right? And they
Oh,
believe
man.
it's diminishing of their energy. I mean, could you imagine anything worse, right? Okay.
They're missing the trick. What's wrong
missing
with these people?
They're missing the only trick, right? Okay. But this is a whole thing. This is a whole tech bro thing that they don't want to ejaculate because that gets rid of some energy, something like this, right? Okay. Right there. He's also infused his own self with his teenage son's blood in a red blood plasma
Jesus.
transfusion. And of course, they're experimenting with gene therapy, right?
Yeah.
Now, he claims that he is slowing his aging process by about 7.5 months per year. So as you and I, it's actually not a great payoff for all
For
this
boring
thing, but
life, yeah.
for a boring life
And blue
then-
balls.
Stop! Exactly. Do you remember Buster Gonad in that?
Yeah, in
particularly
Viz.
brilliant Viz. So Brian Johnson is the Buster Gonad
Yeah.
of the tech world. But let's come back to serious point, right? He has morphed his own personal idea of living forever into a fully fledged community called Don't Die. And these people, John,
Wow.
there are thousands of people now, tens of thousands of people on online forums called Blueprint Discord. There's Don't Die summits, which are, wellness summits, evangelical fervor driven about genetic possibilities. We can slow down and reverse DNA triggering for aging. There's an Irish version of this, John, called longevitySummitDublin.com.
Right.
this
Where
is
does
a
that
real
take
thing.
place? In Tiernanog?
Tiernanog, exactly. Tiernanog, it sounds like one of those estates built in the 1970s. Remember all the estates?
Yes.
It's got the Irish names. Glenasmole,
Yeah.
Tiernanog. Okay. But it's real, John. What I'm saying is there's a massive industry behind this.
I just, the arrogance of it for a start, but the amount of money, not only is it wrong, but it's immoral. The amount of money that's being plowed into something like this that could be redirected into curing diseases, curing cancer, coming up with new innovation in food production. There's so much that this money could be spent on. But here's the thing. There's a great quote from, I can't remember what the film was, but it's about the 3 golden rules for older men.
Oh no, tell us, John, because we need to abide by these
We
very
need to
clearly.
abide
Tell
this.
us.
And this refers back to earlier. Never pass a toilet, never waste a hard-on, and never risk a fart.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
They're the golden
obviously-
rules.
Thank you, John. My day has been made immeasurably better by the understanding, the appreciation, the logging of those golden rules into my head. Right. Okay. Let us move on. The podcast that brings you all sorts of stuff, from the fact that tech boys don't ejaculate to the fact that John always does when he ever gets a chance. Anyway, let us move on. I'll tell you, this guy Johnson, though, you're right about the idea. But you mentioned something there, that this money could go into, for example, a cure for cancer.
Yes.
Right. And it is the very, very increases in human life expectancy, which have occurred over the last, let's say, 100 years or 150 years, due to precisely what you're talking about, innovations in medical technology, innovations in medicine, innovations in lifestyle. It's the very increase in our expectations of how long we're going to live, which has actually triggered this particular movement. This is the interesting thing. So it is grounded in some idea. Like they're basically looking back and they're saying, okay, you know, humans, we used to die on average at 50. We now die on average at 85, I think, in Ireland. I think it's 80, 83 for males,
Yeah,
85 for women. So that is a substantial increase in longevity.
But that's as a result of this medical research into antibiotics and vaccines and also lifestyle as well. And you know, in fairness, some supplements, you know, depending on the part of the world you live in and your diet and all this, are really important and they work.
But what I'm saying is what's triggering their sense of possibility is the actuality that over the last 100 years, there has been a massive, massive increase in human life expectancy. So what they're saying is if we can replicate that, there is a possibility. So let's say that's not all bonkers, that there is something going on. But of course, your man Johnson, I don't know if you saw his movie. He's
No,
a
I
Netflix
haven't. Not
documentary
yet.
called Don't Die,
Right.
The Man Who Wants to Live Forever. Well worth, just have a look at it. Kind of mad stuff. But as you said, it's that combination of tech bro, evangelical belief in science, evangelical belief in the future, and also what we know to be the total and utter obsession of rich men in particular sticking around forever, right? So that's something that we've seen throughout history.
Yeah.
But it's not happening in a vacuum. He is part of a much larger economics of longevity business, right? That's what you could call it, the economics of longevity, right? Anti-aging and longevity, multi-billion-dollar business. I'll give you some figures, John.
Yeah, too.
Anti-aging products, supplements, skincare, wellness programs, all that carry on, $70 billion market.
Wow.
Pauline Rooney, John, Wayne's missus,
Yeah.
just launched her own supplements range, Holland and Barrett, the Kardashians, all that sort of stuff. This market is projected to double to 140 odd billion by 2034.
Driven by influencers.
Yes, but the notion that 60 is the new 40, which you and I definitely are bearing down on, John, and we want to have
For
this,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, is becoming more than a saying. It's a real thing. So also investors, John, in Silicon Valley are bailing into this don't die movement. And so the past few years, biotech startups in longevity are backed by loads of loot, are just sprouting up everywhere, right? Tech billionaires, for example, the Google founders, have backed a company called Calico Labs, which is short for Californian Life Company. Jeff Bezos, your friend and mine, who else? He's put in, with a bunch of his mates, $3 billion into a company called Altos Labs, a company dedicated to cellular reprogramming therapies, hoping to reverse aging.
Oh my God.
And they are reporting some success in extending mice lifespans via gene therapy. So the whole idea is, could you actually, through genetic engineering, isolate the genes which trigger aging and in some way zap them with something so you reverse this? It's called gene editing.
Yeah.
And stem cell therapy. Like, I mean, this is all kind of double Dutch to me because I'm not a biologist. I have no idea of the biology behind it, the science behind it. But certain people who have put in huge amount of money into this area. I'll give you another one. 5 billion in venture capital is flowing into longevity-related companies in 2023. The sector is creating unicorns.
Yeah.
There's a company called Cambrian Bio. Now, Cambrian is a word that the tech bros love because it's the Cambrian moment of creation that they love. And this company develops drugs to slow aging, and it's now valued at 1.8 billion. So it's kind of a unicorn. So
Wow.
the interesting thing is, John, this is happening.
But this industry is mostly America focused, is it? I mean, I know you're talking, these are global figures and stuff, but it's only really Americans and rich Europeans and rich Asians that would be buying them. It's not your average.
Of course not. This is the ultimate high-end consumer product.
Yeah, but it's typical. It's all about quantity and not quality. So the quantity of life, but not the quality of life.
Well, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to create a scenario where your quality of life extends commensurately with your quantity of life.
Yeah.
So, diseases of aging, such as Alzheimer's, for example, the one disease that many people really do not want to get, is again clearly a function of the fact that physically we are being kept alive too long. And some parts of our bodies are just simply shutting down while we're being kept alive.
Yeah.
But what I am fascinated by is this sort of Logan's Run. Did you ever see the movie Logan's Run, John?
Logan's Run. Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
Where it was basically all about the cult of absolute youth. And the cult of absolute youth was so uniform that when you were 35, you had to be killed because you were too old.
Mm.
And Logan's Run is the run of Logan trying to get away from all this carry on. But what I'm saying, John, is this is easy to be cynical about. I'm cynical about it because
Yeah.
I also think that there's just sort of a natural rhythm in life that, basically one of those things that certain obsessives believe is that progression is linear. And I happen to think that progression is cyclical.
Yeah.
That you go up, you go down, you get young, you're old, you die, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but Mark, hang on a second. If we
Hold your
have,
air there for a second. I'm not having this. John, I'm not having this.
if we have, like, we already have an aging population, but if we're elongating our lifespans and we're going to have
I see what you did there.
Hey, more and more older people, like really old people, knocking around on Zimmer frames and wheelchairs and the whole lot. What will that mean for economics and for society? I mean, you often go on about demographics is everything at the end of the day.
You're absolutely, John. I'm going to give you an image of what this society is going to look like. Have you ever been to the Florida Keys?
No, I haven't.
Right. So Key Largo,
Yeah,
Key West is the end, right?
yeah,
The
yeah.
Florida Keys, I spent some time in a place called Isla Morada. This is what this society looks like. It is a society characterized by golf buggies
Yeah,
and incredibly fit old people, rich old white people,
yeah.
being served endless pills and supplements by poor black people. This is so the Florida
Wow.
Keys. If any of our listeners have been to the Florida Keys,
Yeah,
I 20 years ago was asked to work for a company down there. I was a private individual, and I remember giving a speech, and everybody was ancient in the room. And this was the beginning of this process of very, very rich Americans
Mm.
migrating from Pittsburgh, New York, Philadelphia, Boston. They were called the snowbirds in Canada. They basically avoided the snow. They came down to Florida.
Right.
But
Yeah,
the Florida Keys is the sort of Tirnanog of Florida, which is kind of America's Tirnanog in the first place.
yeah,
And you go down the Florida Keys, they're held together by roads through the ocean.
yes, yeah.
And very, very, very strange places. And the image you get there, John, is the image that you're looking for, which is this crazy idea of age apartheid, where Tirnanog is about the young dominating the old,
Yeah,
but American Tirnanog is about the old dominating the young. So you have these ancient, wizened creatures kept alive by supplements and pills being waited on by virile, young, usually Caribbean, usually black people.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the image, right?
God.
And
What
it's
kind of a
kind of
world would
tragic. It's
awful.
really tragic. It's really tragic. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking to myself, wow, this is so odd. And coming back home to Dublin and just thinking, thanks, Billy Jays. I remember I told my alpha about it. This is when Dad was still alive. And he said, that's a terrible cod. Which I loved. That's a terrible cod, young fella. So that's what that world looks like, John.
It's not attractive world to me at all. I know there's
No.
not a world I want to live in.
No, it's not the world, given the state of you, you're going to live in either.
Let's pick this up after the break.
Fair enough.
Mac, we're talking about aging and everlasting youth
And codology.
and godology. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But there's one thing about, keeping the body alive, but there's another thing about your mind. But here's the thing. You were talking about Key West and Florida and all the rest. Yesterday in France, went on a cycle around beautiful wine country. And at one point, and this is in 30 something degrees, and at one point I kind of climbed to the top of a hill, wheezing, sweating,
I'm just laughing at the picture.
and I was on an electric bike. And, and this woman, I'd say she was well into her 80s, came up the other side in one of those, ancient 1920s bikes or whatever. Not a bother on her, just whizzed with her. She was either in her 80s and mega fit, or she was 26 with really bad skin. I don't know which. But I didn't feel good.
The thing is, it would be really nice as a general rule to age well. That is what we all hope, that we will age well and that we'll be able to be physically fit and mentally fit and do all the things, or most of the things we could do when we were younger. I mean, that's I think what most of us want, is not necessarily to live forever or even live beyond a certain date, but actually to live reasonably well during this period. And I mean, this is the objective. But this has been, John, down through the ages. I'll bring you back. You may well have had that epiphany yesterday as you were up the top of the hill. But ancient China, 3rd century BC, one of the most extraordinary things about China is the terracotta army. Do you remember that one that was found?
Oh, it's fantastic. Right? Yeah.
But that was, I'll tell you, the tomb of the Emperor Qin Shi Huang. Now, Qin Shi Huang sent scholars and alchemists around searching for the elixir of life in the 3rd century BCE. Now, he ingested, so he swallowed mercury-laced potions they gave him because they believed mercury would confer immortality. But of course, mercury killed him, right?
Yeah, of course it did.
And it poisoned him to death at the age of 49. And it's his massive tomb, which is guarded by the famed terracotta army.
Yeah.
And it's reported that this even contains liquid mercury, a testament to the death-defying ambitions, right? Which is bizarre. So instead of eternal life, poor Al Quinn is a cautionary tale from history. Trying too hard not to die actually hastens his own demise. And that again is another sort of thing, this idea that, you have to be aware as you get older that you can't do these things because you can't be pushing yourself all the time. But to get back to our tech bros, right? I mean, there is something in this quest to create longevity that will never, ever go away. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah.
It ain't going to go away. But maybe we should end with what sort of society looks like, or what a society looks like if it gets very old. And again, we go to Asia for the example. The example is Japan.
Yeah.
So Japan is a society where not too many years ago, it sold more nappies for old people than for babies.
Yes.
Right? Okay. That is an image. I'm not too sure which is the worst image. You at the top of the hill sweating or the Japanese nappy issue, right? Now, interestingly, I have just received a book in the post about the economic history of Japan by a former colleague of mine, former boss of mine called Russell Jones. And what I might do is I might have a brief look at that. And we might do over the next week or two a podcast on the Japanese economy and society now, because that is the society that has become very old. And it's also the society where people live longest.
But they're also a struggling economy as well.
So that's what we'll go into. Is it absolutely the case that when the economy gets old, when societies get old, the economy goes backwards, the society goes backwards? Or have the Japanese, yet again, figured out a way to avoid the vista, the appalling vista of the Florida Keys, which is just awful, right?
Yeah.
And live with the idea of a large section of the population over 80 90, or even over 100. Because the idea is, for the tech bros, is that at the moment, the oldest humans are living, I think it's to 120. I think it's the oldest person in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they're saying, if one person can do it, everyone can do it. Or if one person can do it, they can do it with all their supplements. So that's their target, is 120. Let's,
Right.
in the next podcast, John, look at a society that is moving in that direction.
Oh my
See
God, that doesn't
what it
sound
looks
like
like.
crack at all.
No crack.
Yeah.
No crack cul-de-sac.
The
John.
don't die is don't have crack.
Anyway, listen, we'll talk to you tomorrow or the next day. All right. Bye.
Good luck.